Hey folks, David Stewart here. I'd like to talk a little bit about Google Stadia, something that everybody has been crapping on recently, including myself. But I wanted to take some time and make a little bit more balanced video and talk about some of the issues that I see with Google Stadia that aren't being talked about quite as much as some other issues. The focus of the press seems to be around particular technical things, and I want to expand that discussion a little bit. First of all, if you don't know what Google Stadia is, it is Google's attempt to create a gaming platform that is not tied to a specific piece of hardware that you buy, but rather involves computing that's done off-site. So rather than buying a Google console like your PlayStation that you actually play games on, it actually runs the software is being run in some server center that Google owns, and they're streaming the video. It's like a super long HDMI cable. They're streaming the video to your device, which is displaying the video and then is relaying back all of the inputs to that computer. So the whole idea here is you could play a really, really high quality PC game on your phone because the phone doesn't need to be doing all of the hard work of processing all of those polygons and pixels and textures and everything that goes into making a high graphic quality game. Rather, that's done in a specialized computer, and then it's just displaying a stream of the video. Of course, how this is required to work is you have to have a pretty low amount of latency, because if you tap a button and it takes some time for that information to go to that server and to actually affect what's happening in the game, and it takes some time, of course, for the video to get back. If there's too much latency there, it's going to be unplayable, and that tends to be what most people are focusing on. Now, what I want to say is that this is actually not a new idea. This is not a novel or new idea. This has actually been around for a while. PlayStation Now as a service has been around for several years now. If you don't know what PS Now is, it's basically the same idea. I have a Sony TV. It has PS Now in it. I could hook up a PlayStation controller and stream PlayStation games to the TV. My PlayStation 4 also has this, although that might seem redundant on a PlayStation 4. What PS Now was really cool for is like, hey guys, if you're hanging out, you remember how cool Devil May Cry was? Well, you could stream Devil May Cry, a PlayStation 2 game, if you didn't have a PlayStation 2 anymore. You could just, stream it to your TV, stream it to your PlayStation, and play it. And PS Now, though, never really got a strong foothold. This didn't really become the big thing that I think Sony maybe wanted it to become. The whole idea was, and I could talk a little bit about the marketing. If you're selling lots of Sony TVs, for instance, that represents the possibility of having an installed user base. And this is what I think Google is latching onto with Stadia. Is that if you have a Google phone, and I actually have an original Pixel, so if you have a Google phone, then this represents an installed user, a user that has the potential to use your service. And so you want to sell them the product, you want to sell them the service, rather than having to get them to, to motivate them to go out and buy an extra piece of hardware. You just have to get them to use the hardware they already have, and that's the big advantage there. So the idea of PS Now is that you could play past games on PS Now, from whatever generation, without having to buy some new version for your PlayStation 4. The thing about PS Now was they charged by the hour, and I haven't used it in quite some time, so they may have changed this. So they charged by the hour, which was a little bit weird. And if they'd had, maybe a set subscription like Netflix or something, it might have been a more attractive service. But as it was just something that was maybe useful for a night. Like, you wanted to play Devil May Cry and remember that game, or play Kingdom Hearts, and you don't happen to have your PlayStation 2 sitting around to play those games. It was kind of cool for that. But as far as Stadia goes, they're going to hopefully try to improve that. Now, the thing is, PS Now actually worked pretty well. There was some lag, but for most of the games that you were playing, the lag was not so profound that you couldn't play the game. It was actually pretty solid. Another thing that Sony has already been doing for years is streaming to the Vita. So most people only stream to the Vita if they're using the Vita streaming option on their PlayStation 4, their PlayStation 3 in their house. I've actually tested it and done it over the internet. Because the way it works is it finds your actual PlayStation. I actually got on my mom's Wi-Fi. She's in Bakersfield. I live 6 hours away, basically. No, about 4 hours away. Sorry. So I live up, closer to the Bay Area, and I got onto her Wi-Fi, and her internet's really slow, and it's always been really pretty bad. But I was able to get on it with my PlayStation, turn on my PlayStation 4 over the internet and play Diablo 3 multiplayer with really virtually no lag. I was absolutely shocked how good the experience was. However, there were always hiccups because sometimes there's a little bit of a lag spike for whatever reason. There's a bunch of servers between you and your PlayStation, and so there'd be a little lag spike, and then the video would kind of jump for a second, and then finally everything would kind of get back into place. So there were always technical hiccups, and even if you're playing on your own home Wi-Fi network, sometimes there's technical hiccups as well, but it worked pretty well. Same thing with the NVIDIA Shield. If you've played with an NVIDIA Shield, basically it streams the graphics from your PC, and I've streamed PC graphics within my own home network to other PCs. It works really well. It works surprisingly well. The question with Stadia is because you're not streaming within your home, you're going to some data center that's really far away. Well, supposedly Google's going to be using some higher quality set of networks to do that, meaning not the normal plebeian internet. Instead, we're going to be doing the Google internet. But the reality is, for this service to be usable for people who want to play very Twitch-based games, you're going to have a very good internet connection, like Google Fiber or 100 megabit per second. Internet, because you have to deal with lag spikes, and there's going to be congestion, there's going to be issues with it. There's some other issues with it too that people talk about. The fact that it's a $10 a month subscription and you still have to buy the games. If it was $10 a month and you didn't have to buy the games, well, now you're talking. If it's $10 a month and rather than just, I think there's like a small selection of free games. If it's $10 a month and there's a game library, and maybe there's different premium tiers or something, I don't know. But if it's a subscription service and there's a games library, now you're talking. Now it's like, well, not only is it value, because instead of me buying games every month, kind of like what Xbox has a subscription that's somewhat like that. Rather than me buying games every month, I could spend less money and just try out and stream and play all the games that I want to play. Kind of like with audio streaming services, it makes sense from a value perspective. If you can pay $10, $15 a month for music streaming, that saves a lot of money because $15 is one CD, right? And if you're buying vinyl, which I usually do, you're talking it's like the less than a cost of one vinyl record, and you get essentially unlimited streaming of whatever you want, meaning you don't have to really love an album to buy it. You can just listen to it, and you could have the same thing with games. But the fact that it's that plus a digital games library, and this is actually one of the problems that I see, and this is something that I haven't seen a whole lot of people talk about, other than my friends on YouTube, my subscribers that are telling me these things, and I'm like, yeah, you guys are right. So here's a problem with Google Stadia. Besides, most of the gaming press is focusing on, is it going to technically work? I could tell you technically it's probably going to work, because the Sony version works actually really well. Google's probably going to do it better. But there's a problem with obsolescence, and shall we say planned obsolescence. So if you have a device, there's this cycle with phones where they just become obsolete basically in 2 years, and that's the goal. It's like you want somebody to be buying a new device every 2 years, and so in order to do that, you have to bloat up the software. You have to keep coming out with new features and software that require newer, better, faster hardware. Now, the advantage of Stadia would be, hey, you don't have to buy that new PC every couple of years. They're going to keep on top of the newer, better hardware. It's going to stream in 4K, the whole bit. The problem is that the device that you hold on to is still going to become obsolete. So you're still going to be dealing with planned obsolescence with the devices that you have, the Chromecast or the phone, right? So when your device becomes obsolete, now you can no longer access the games that you wanted to access. It becomes obsolete because you're going to have to keep updating Android in order to continue streaming, and then eventually whatever version of Android you get is going to be so bloated it's not going to work on your phone, which means all of a sudden you can't use the streaming service anymore. You have to buy the new Pixel 5, the Pixel 6, or whichever one it happens to be that's coming out. So the planned obsolescence has the potential to make you buy more hardware at a higher price than if you bought a console. So if you bought a PlayStation, The only thing that PlayStation's come out with is the PS4 Pro, which is like a slight upgrade, and it's not necessary, right? I buy games that are like PS4 Pro Enhanced. I'm like, doesn't matter, right? It looks great on my original PlayStation I bought like the day when PlayStation 4s came out. I've had zero problems with my console. Although, though, I will say that my PlayStation's disk drive, I think, is starting to wear out after like, 5 years worth of frequent use. That's actually, I don't know, that's kind of expected. It's not that much of a bad thing. So rather than buying a $400, or however much it is, $400 console, you're buying an $800 phone every 3 years in order to maintain your ability to access a library that you've paid into. And the more money you pay into that library, kind of like a Steam library, the more you're not going to want to lose access to it. So I think it has potential to actually extract more money for hardware spent rather than less. Now, with things like TV, Chromecast, probably not as much. However, with phones, for sure, and depending on which devices people actually want to access this on, that's a problem. Now, if I were to get out I think my Super Nintendo's over there. I could plug my Super Nintendo in, put in a game, and play it. I can even play it on a modern TV, even though it doesn't look quite the same as an old CRT. Point is, I can play the games that I bought back in like 1991. I could hook up a PlayStation 1 and play any PlayStation game. Same thing with PlayStation 2. My GameCube still plays all of its GameCube games. What happens 10, 20 years down the road with this? With the game you bought, if the service folds, you lose that, right? Because it's kind of, when you buy a license, you're just buying what amounts to a permanent rental. And I say this having a huge number of games in my Steam library. When the requirements for the software itself or the platform itself outgrow your hardware, like if I want to play Steam games on an old Windows XP computer, can I even do that? I don't even know if I can. Whereas I could, on that Windows XP computer, put in the disk for Morrowind and play Morrowind. I could actually do that, and that's actually really cool. But when you lose that physical disc and you lose this platform called a console, the future of the game, access to the game, becomes really uncertain. In 20 years, I could put in my PlayStation 4 games, and they'll probably still run on my PlayStation, even if it can't access the internet anymore. Most of the games are going to run just fine on that platform. But as time reaches infinity with this, who knows? Because 20 years seemed like a long time when I was 10, but it's not that long now. And for those of you guys who are young, in 20 years, you probably still want to be playing your old consoles because there's lots of great games for them. And I don't know what's going to happen there. You're going to have to buy new copies for the new console. It seems like that might be what they want you to do, but that's not very fun. And one of the things that happens too is that when you step outside that original console, it looks different, it plays different. It's not the same. You can't quite emulate that original experience. So that's something that I think needs to be thought of, is that, hey, they have your whole library, and when your things become obsolete, can you play them anymore? Well, you probably can't. And then the last thing, of course, is I kind of jokingly had this with a couple polls on Twitter and YouTube. Should we boycott it because it sucks or because it's Google? The fact is, Google is not a super trustworthy company at this point in time as far as maintaining your account and access to your accounts. They've canceled people's Gmail accounts for no reason. And some people have gotten them back, some people haven't. They cancel YouTube accounts for no reason. So if Google decides to ban you, does that mean you lose all of your game library, all of that money that you put in? You don't get a refund for that. They just get to keep your money and you lose access. It's kind of like, on Xbox Live, they could ban your console, but they can't make your console stop working. So you could still put in Oblivion and play your Xbox 360, but you wouldn't be able to play on Xbox Live if they ban your console. This is a completely different level where it's like if they ban you, you lose the games too. Like you can't play the games, and you're completely lost with that. So that's the other thing with this too. And lastly, people point out, I'm not sure who this is for, right? Core gamers are happy to buy the good hardware and set things up the way they want to if they're PC gamers, or if they're console gamers. it's not that big of a deal to buy a console and know that for the next however many years, all the software that's released for that console is going to work on it. Likewise, consoles offer a different experience than, say, your phone or something else like that. So I'm not quite sure who this is for. I think some of the things I've read, investors seem interested in it, but it's not that new and it hasn't really caught on with PlayStation. I don't know how Google's going to succeed where Sony failed, except in the case that they have the potential for a bigger user install base, which is a phone, right? If you can get people to stream this stuff to their phone, that could actually make mobile gaming a lot better. That's cool. But at the same time, you're still plugged into that channel of planned obsolescence. So thanks so much for watching. Leave me your thoughts on Stadia down below. I'd be interested to hear your arguments. I think it's actually not that bad of an idea, and I think it's going to be better than what a lot of people think. The problem is I'm not sure who actually would end up using this compared to the more traditional alternative. So let me know, and I'll see you guys next time. Oh, new books are out. Join my mailing list, dvspress.com/list, or click the link down below and you'll get my newest little book. It's another 2-hour read. This one's sci-fi horror called Voices of the Void. Check it out. Check out my books on Amazon, and I'll see you guys next time.